Alright guys, I've got this quiz that we just took pulled up here. We're going to go ahead and go over this so that you can take a retake of this same quiz and show me that you have learned all the stuff, okay? Alright, check it out. For the first 4 questions, we're listing all of the possible rational zeros. If you guys remember, that's the plus or minus p over q thing, okay? So let me show you how we did this. You start with p, which is all the factors of the last number. So the factors of 27 are 1, 3, 9, and 27. And then you divide by q, which is all the factors of the first number. There's no number there, I'm just going to go ahead and put 1. Okay, and then we put those together. So don't leave them like this. So my answer is it's plus or minus 1, plus or minus 3, plus or minus 9, plus or minus 27, because I'm just dividing each of those by 1. And I'm fine with you guys just putting the plus or minus in front, okay? It doesn't have to go to every single number. Alright, let's look at number 2. Okay, so my p's are all the factors of 20. 1 goes in, 2 goes in, 3 does not, okay? 4 goes in, 5 goes in, and then 4 times 5, so then 2 times 10, and 1 times 20. That's kind of how I do it when I'm trying to find all the factors. And then over 3. The factors of 3 are 1 and 3. Okay, now here's how I want you to list them out. First, divide everything by 1. I'm going to make one big long list. Well, you guys, all those numbers divided by 1 are just themselves. 1, 2, 4, 5, 10, 20. Now I'm going to divide all those numbers by 3. And as long as they don't reduce, I'm going to go ahead and list them. 1/3, 2/3, 4/3, 5/3, 10/3, 20/3. These are my rational zeros. These are the numbers that could possibly work with like synthetic division, right? That's what we're finding. But right now we're just making our list. Okay, now I know that this doesn't have a number on the end right here, you know, so you might think it's like 0, but I'm going to go ahead and just use this number right there, right? So for my p's, it's going to be plus or minus 1. Those are the only factors of 1. For my q's, it's going to be plus or minus 1 and 2. Now be careful when you write these out. I'm doing 1 over 1, and then I'm doing 1 over 2. Okay, and my possible rational zeros are plus or minus 1 and plus or minus 1/2. Alright? Okay, let's look at number 4. This one's kind of cool. Alright, my p's are the factors of 9 are 1, 3, 9. My q's are also factors of 9, 1, 3, 9. Okay, here's how it works. Let's divide everything by 1. Well, that's just going to give me 1, 3, 9. 1 divided by 1, 3 divided by 1, 9 divided by 1. Now let's divide everything by 3. Okay, so I'm going to go 1 over 3. Now, 3 over 3, I'm not going to list it because 3 over 3 is 1. I don't need to list that. 9 over 3 is 3. I don't need to list that either. Okay, now I'm going to go to this one. And I'm going to go, okay, 1 over 9. Well, that I should list, right? 3 over 9. 3 over 9 is 1/3, and it's already there. And then 9 over 9 is 1. It's already there. So you don't have to list repeats. Okay, and then I'm just going to box this. All right? Okay, good. All right, now, most of the rest of these, and when you take the retake, I'll do the same thing that I did here where I tell you what to use, Desmos or grouping or whatever, are the same. We're just trying to find all the zeros, okay? Now, if I tell you to use Desmos, just keep this pulled up over here, I'm going to type in that equation, all right? X to the 3rd minus 19x plus 30. And even though I can't see the top of the graph, it doesn't matter. All I care about is where it crosses, okay? Now, those are the answers, but I still have to show my work on this, so you guys are going to pick -5, 2, or 3 on this problem. Like, it doesn't matter which one you pick. You can pick -5, 2, or 3, okay? And your first step is you're going to do synthetic division with one of those numbers. So let's say I pick -5, right? Again, no rhyme or reason, just what I picked. You can pick whatever you want. Now, this one is a little tricky. Look, it has an x to the third, and then it goes to an x. But do you guys remember when we have polynomials, we have to have every term in between? So there's actually a 0x squared there. 1x to the third, 0x squared, negative 19x plus 30. It has to go like every single term. Like look at this one, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, look at this one, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. It has to have every single term. This was the only one that didn't, okay? So when I'm doing synthetic division, I actually have to put that 0 in there or it's going to mess up. Okay, now I go, bring down the first number. 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. And then you add. 0 and negative 5 gives me negative 5. Then you multiply. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. And then you add. Negative 19 plus 25 is 6. And then you multiply. So you guys, every time you come through here, you're multiplying. Okay? 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. And then you add. And you get 0. Alright? Okay, now, I'm going to take the numbers that I have left over right here and turn them into an equation. And I want to solve that, and I can either solve that by factoring or quadratic formula. Now, if you can do factoring, that's going to be way better than if you have to do quadratic formula. In this case, this actually factors, okay? So we've been working on a lot of factoring. So I'm going to go, what multiplies to make 6 and adds to make 5? 2 and 3, and they're going to both be negative. And so my solutions, you guys, are x equals 2 and x equals 3. Now over here, when it asks for the zeros, okay, I had one right here, because it worked from Desmos, and then I had the other two right here. So my zeros are negative 5, 2, and 3. Okay, now I have to do my factorization. My factorization is, what did the negative 5 come from? X plus 5. You got to do it for all three of them. What did 2 come from? X minus 2. And what did 3 come from? X minus 3. And let me show you how you can check your answers. Alright, look at Desmos again. And this one for sure tells us the answers are negative 5, 2, and 3. What did we get? Negative 5, 2, and 3. But I need to be able to see the work that you did on synthetic division and the factoring to get those. But at least Desmos can like kind of help you. Okay? Nice. Alright, now this one says grouping. I want to use grouping. I don't want to use Desmos on this one. When I tell you guys to do grouping, that's the way I want you to do it. So, okay, 9 and 63, I can take out a 9. X to the third and x squared, I can take out an x squared. Alright. If I take 9 out of 9 and x squared out of x to the third, I have x. And 63 divided by 9 is 7. And then I come over here. Now look, let's say you're not entirely sure. Like, well, what goes into 16 and 112? Just try to figure something out. Also, remember that the thing that's left over, I mean, if I tell you it can be done by grouping, that's going to be what's left over. Well, if x plus 7 is supposed to be what's left over, then guess what? I'm probably going to be able to divide both by 16. Okay, but you're allowed to use a calculator. Desmos has a calculator in it, actually. So if I just go, what's 112 divided by 16? It'll tell me it's 7. Okay. So this is x. A negative divided by negative is positive x plus 7. Now once you do that, and you get these two to be the same in here, okay, we bring that out front. And over here, we say, okay, well, what's left? Well, it's like if I took out the x plus 7 and the x plus 7, I put it in the front, what's left over? 9x squared minus 16. And you always want to keep factoring down until you have like single x's, you know? This, you guys, is a difference of 2 squares. Oops. Okay? So it's x plus 7. And then this is 3x times 3x. 16 is 4 times 4. And with difference of 2 squares, we always do 1 plus 1 minus. Okay? So I factored this by grouping, and here's my zeros. This one is negative 7. This one is negative 4/3. This one is positive 4/3. Okay, so my zeros are -7, -4/3, and 4/3. And what's my complete factorization? Well, you have it right above. Like, this is it right here. That's my complete factorization. So I just put those back into x plus 7, 3x plus 4, 3x minus 4. Okay? So that's how I would do that by grouping. Now look, I didn't tell you could use decimals on this problem, but really you can use decimals on the whole test. And let's just see if I put this into decimals. I still want you to show me grouping because I told you to do it by grouping. But let's just see what I get real quick, okay? So 9x to the third plus 63x squared minus 16x minus 112. All right, pretty ugly problem there, but -7, that's cool. I got that. -1.333. What is that? That's -1 1/3. Guess what? That's -4/3. And 1.333. That's positive 4/3. You know, and I could check that. I could go like, what's -4/3? What's positive 4/3? And you can see right here your answers. So I'm okay with you checking and using decimals to make sure that your answers are right. You know, you still just got to go through and show me all the work. Okay? Okay, this one was a little tricky. I will probably put a question like this on there, though. Just keep a question like this. What you had to do first, actually, was factor an x out from each term. Because I want you guys to notice on this one that you have an x4, x3, x2, x. I can take an x out of everything and then just make it 2x to the third minus 9x squared plus minus 20x plus 12. And I told you that when you do that, that means you're going to have an answer of 0 and you're going to have an x in front. Okay? So that's how we're going to start this one. And now I'm actually going to do the rest of the problem with this. Okay, so don't worry about that extra x in there. And I'm going to use decimals to find my first solution. All right, so, okay, I'm going to put in 2x to the third minus 9x squared minus 20x plus 12. Cool. -2.5 and 6. Pick any of those that you want to start with. It's fine. And use that. Okay, I don't care if you start with -2. I don't care if you start with 0.5. I don't care if you start with 6. It's up to you. I'm going to go ahead and pick -2. Alright? That's just the first one there. Okay, so I'm going to go like this. -2 into, and I'm going to do those numbers right there. 2, -9, -20, and 12. Okay, synthetic division goes like this. Bring down the 2. 2 times -2 is -4. That's 13. -13 times -2 is positive 26, so that's 6. 6 times -2 is -12, so that's 0. So that worked out nicely. And then remember, we take these numbers that are left right here and we turn them into an equation. 2x squared minus 13x plus 6. And I have to solve that to get my last two equations. Now let me tell you guys something. Do you see how on Desmos we got whole numbers, or at least like nice decimals? We got nice decimals for this. This factors. The only time you have to do quadratic formula is if you get like really ugly looking numbers or imaginary numbers, okay? These are like nice rational numbers. So this actually does factor. Now, if you absolutely can't figure out how to factor it and you want to do quadratic, you can. But check this out. Do you guys remember? It goes 2xx. And then for 6, okay, I can either use 1 times 6, 3 times 2. So if you try it like, let's try it that way first. This way's wrong, but let's try it this way first. I get 2x and 6x. Does that equal 13? No. So then you try something else. I'm like, okay, that doesn't work. Say I try 2 and 3. I get 6x and 2x. Does that give me 13? No. And I keep trying things until it gives me 13. Well, let's say I do 1 and 6. Okay, look at what I get. 12x and 1x. All right? And I can get negative 13 out of that if they're both negative. So I'm going to make this -1 and -6. And you see how that gives me my middle term of negative 13. So that's cool. Okay, let me just erase that because now that I verified it. And let's talk about our solutions. Well, look, I have a solution. Well, first of all, I have that x, which was 0. I already put that. I have a solution right here. That solution is negative 2. And I've got some solutions over here. If I add 1 and divide by 2, that one's 1/2. If I add 6, I get 6. So it's 1/2 and 6. And you guys, you want to check this on Desmos? What was I getting? Negative 2.5 and 6. I was getting all those answers. Now, I don't see the 0 because I already factored it out ahead of time. But if I hadn't, let's say I was putting, oh shoot, I just erased that. Let's say I was putting this whole thing in front. Let me retype this in. Minus 9x squared minus 20x plus 12. And let's say I didn't, take out that. I'll have the 0 in there and you can see it. Okay, you could see it right there, too. Anyway, for the factorization, well, look, 0 came from x, negative 2 came from x plus 2, 1/2 came from 2x minus 1, and 6 came from x minus 6. Okay, so you guys can kind of like go backwards, I guess, here to see the factors, and that just put it in a thing opposite, and you can see all your factors right there. All right, cool. Now look, on number 8, it's going to start to get a little bit trickier. We have to do Desmos. We have to do it twice. Okay? Okay, so let me see here. X to the 4th plus 2x to the 3rd minus 2x squared minus 6x minus 3. Oh, I didn't have a 2 right there. Okay, perfect. Fun. Alright, you guys. When you see a number like that, negative 1.732, okay, that means that number came from the quadratic formula. I'm not going to be able to use that number in synthetic division. Same thing with that number. 1.732. Those are like square rooty type numbers. I'll show you at the end of the problem how, where those come from. But basically, the only other number I have right here is negative 1. So I'm gonna do synthetic division with negative 1. Now it told me to do it twice, and the problem is I can't use that and I can't use that. Okay, but check it out, guys. Negative 1 bounces. So what does that mean? It means it actually is a solution 2 times. So I can use negative 1 2 times and do synthetic division. And the whole reason why I have to do it 2 times is because it's an x to the 4th anyway, so I have to do synthetic division twice to get it down to x squared, which is something I can factor, or quadratic formula, right? Okay, so let's start with negative 1. I'm going to go 1, 2, negative 2, negative 6, and negative 3. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, that's 1. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, that's negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3, that's negative 3. And negative 3 times negative 1 is 3, and that's 0. Now I'm going to do synthetic division again because it bounced. I know that this was a solution 2 times. So I'm going to do it one more time with my new numbers. I'm not going to go back to the original numbers, okay? One more time with my new numbers. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1, that's 0. 0 times negative 1 is 0, that's negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3, and that's 0. Okay, so far I have negative 1 2 times. Okay, now, remember I was telling you, we take what's left over and we make an equation out of it. And this equation is going to be x squared plus 0x minus 3. Now, I'm not even going to write the plus 0x. Okay, I'm just going to write x squared minus 3. Now, if you really wanted to do this with quadratic formula, you could, but there's an easier way to solve that. If I just said, hey, can you solve x squared minus 3? How would you solve that? Well, I'm going to add 3 to the other side. and then I'm going to square root both sides. And we know that when we square root both sides, we get plus or minus square root 3. Okay, so my zeros are -1 twice. Now guys, look, you could either write -1, -1, you can write it 2 times, or do you remember that you're allowed to write it has a multiplicity of 2, which means 2 times, right? And then it's positive or negative square root 3. Okay, before we put it into the factorization, let's look at something real quick. Look at Desmos, what we did. You guys see this? Okay, those were my solutions. Okay, check this out. What is the positive square root of 3? 1.73. What is the negative square root of 3? Negative 1.73. Look, that's the negative square root of 3. That's the positive square root of 3, and that's 1, and it bounces 2 times. So I just showed that it's going to be those. Again, you can use Desmos to verify. You still got to do all your work, okay? So now my factorization. All right, -1 came from x plus 1. Guys, you can either write it twice, okay, or you can put a squared on there. All right? You can either write it twice or you can put a squared. Okay, now, +3, -3. Now, don't write it in the same parenthesis. Think about them as 2 separate ones. Plus square root 3 minus square root 3. Well, the plus came from that, and the minus came from that. That's my complete factorization where I put each one back into parentheses. Okay? Okay, nice. My next question, we're going to do grouping on this one. Grouping, okay? All right. From my first 2 terms, I can take out an x squared. Okay? From my second 2 terms, okay, now again, if you're like, oh, you know, I don't know what goes into 90 and 36, like, okay, I get it. But we probably have to match that. So I guess I'm kind of thinking like, well, if that's supposed to be a 5x, what do I take out of 90 to get 5? I mean, I don't know. What do I take out of? Get rid of this stuff. 90 divided by 5 is 18. Okay? So if I take out a -18, it looks like I have 5x. And negative divided by negative, 36 divided by 18, it's 5x plus 2. Okay? Alright, cool. Now, check it out. Didn't need that. Okay, I've got 5x plus 2. And then my other part, so it's like, remember, we took out that and that, we put it in the front, and my other part is x squared minus 18. Okay? Now, this doesn't exactly factor. The x squared minus 18 doesn't exactly factor, so we got to get a little bit tricky with this. Because it's not a difference of squares, so I'm going to go like this. X squared equals 18, and if I square root both sides, I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 18. But we have to break that down because there's some prisoners in here, right? You guys remember how to break these down? 2 times 9, 3 times 3. I have a pair of 3s. One dies, one escapes. So it's plus or minus 3 root 2. Okay? So this gives me plus or minus 3 root 2. This gives me negative 2 over 5. Those are my zeros. Okay? Negative 2 over 5 and plus or minus 3 root 2. Alright, now what does negative 2 over 5 come from? Well, that came from 5x plus 2. And I know these came from x squared minus 18, but what we're going to do is make them into their own factors. One is positive 3 root 2. That's going to be x minus 3 root 2. One is negative 3 root 2. That's going to be x plus 3 root 2. And that's my factorization. Okay, so continuing on here, guys. All right, we got this one. Now, when you guys see 3 terms, that means that it's going to factor to like these 2 parenthesis things, right? So we start with like, okay, what multiplies to make x to the 4th, x squared, and then we go, what multiplies to make 20, and the middle has to give me 1. Well, multiplying to make 20 is 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 4 and 5. I'm going to use 4 and 5. Because look, remember we do this? 5x squared, 4x squared. How do I get negative 1? That's negative. That's positive. Okay? Now, I need to, let me just erase this. I don't need that there. I need to solve both of these. And these are, neither one is actually a difference of 2 squares. So these are a little tricky, okay? These are a little tricky. X squared plus 4 is 0. I need to solve that. And x squared minus 5 is 0. Well, look. When I subtract the 4 over, okay, and then I go to take the square root of it, you guys see how we have a negative in the square root sign? So there we go. Well, it's plus or minus. Now, 4 is a perfect square. The square root of 4 is 2, but this negative right here actually means that I have to put an I on here because it's imaginary. So it's plus or minus 2i. Now, let's solve the other one. If I bring the 5 over and I square root it, this one is not imaginary. It just happens to be a square root that we don't know what the square root is. Plus or minus square root of 5. Okay, so look, I get positive 2i, negative 2i. You can write plus or minus 2i, I don't really care. I get positive square root 5, and I get negative square root 5. And so how do I write the factorization for that? Well, you just put each one back into parentheses. So it's x minus 2i, x plus 2i, x minus root 5, x plus root 5. Okay? Now, you might be wondering, can I check this one too on Desmos? Okay, you actually kind of can. Check it out. If I put this on Desmos, so x to the 4th minus x squared minus 20, okay? I get those two answers. I get negative 2.236 and positive 2.236. Now here's the thing. Imaginary numbers are not going to show up on Desmos. So you won't be able to see the 2i and the negative 2i. But check it out, guys. What's the square root of 5 and the negative square root of 5? Because I got that for my answer. Square root of 5, negative square root of 5. Boom, boom. Okay? So you're good to check at least like the irrational numbers, the square roots, and check and make sure that you got those right. It just won't show you the I. The I is what makes it be kind of like bumpy down there, but it doesn't like cross the axis. Okay? Alright, nice. One more question to do with Desmos. Let me bring that back up again. Alright. X to the 3rd minus 5x squared minus 7x plus 51. I only got 1 point right there. Now, already that tells me I'm going to have some imaginaries. Okay? But at least I know I have one answer. My one answer is negative 3. So here we go. I'm going to take negative 3, 1, negative 5, negative 7, 51. Let's see what I get. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. That's negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 3 is 24. Wait, yeah. And 24 minus 7 is, 17. It's getting late. Okay, 17 times negative 3 is negative 51. That's 0. So negative 3 works. And then, remember, we take these numbers and we make an equation. Now, you guys, I could try to factor this, but it doesn't factor. Like, there's nothing that multiplies to make 17 except for 1 and 17, and it's not going to make 8. So it's like, that is not going to factor. If it doesn't factor, you have to do the quadratic formula. So far, I think this is the only question where I had to do quadratic. Everything else I could solve by, like, square rooting at least. So I have to do quadratic on this, okay? Okay, let's remember the quadratic formula. It goes like this. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so that gives me positive 8. On the bottom is 2. And what I'm really trying to figure out is this. Alright, you guys, a negative squared, negative 8 squared is a positive 64. 4 times 1 times 17, I'm just going to use this for all my calculating needs. 4 times 1 times 17 is 68. Okay. Oh, sorry. That's not the answer. That's what's up there. Now, 64 minus 68 is negative 4. So we got to go from here, okay? So, that's going to be 8 plus or minus. Now, when we square root a negative, that's I, and then the square root of 4 is 2. And then my last step is, if you remember, all 3 need to simplify. Well, 8, 2, and 2 goes in, 2 goes in everything, 4, 1, 1. So my final answer is 4 plus or minus I over 1. And you don't have to put the over 1, okay? So here's my zeros. Remember, you have this one over here. I have negative 3, and then I have 4 plus I, and then I have 4 minus I. Okay, so it's 4 plus or minus I. And here are the factors that they come from. All right, the negative 3 comes from x plus 3. Now with these guys, just change the signs of both. 4 plus I, it comes from minus 4 minus I. 4 minus I, it comes from minus 4 plus I. We just change the signs of both, and then that's how I factor. And again, you can't check the imaginaries on decimals. You can only check the real numbers on decimals. Okay? All right, last little part of the test. Okay, so we talked about how we're going to write these back into their factors. All right, and you guys, you do not have to multiply these ones out. Negative 3 comes from x plus 3. The fact that it's a multiplicity of 2, you either have to write it twice or you have to square it, okay? 4 comes from x minus 4. Again, you either have to write that twice or you have to square it. And that's it. That's my polynomial function right there. Now, it says in standard form. We're not going to do it in standard form because then you have to multiply everything out. That just takes forever. We're only going to do that on the I problems. Okay, now check this out. Plus or minus square root 6. Okay, that goes, the positive square root 6 comes from x minus root 6. The negative comes from x plus root 6. Okay, now this one, do you guys remember the 3 is the thing that goes up? So the positives comes from 3x minus 2. The negative comes from 3x plus 2. So we're just like thinking about this backwards because I would get 2/3 of negative 2/3 if I solve that. And then you guys, 0 just comes from x. Most people put the x on the front, but you can put it wherever you want. All right, nice. Now, whenever you see an imaginary number, the first thing is you have to write the opposite. So if you see 3i, you have to write negative 3i. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and go like this. Plus 4 root 2, that would come from x minus 4 root 2, and minus would come from x plus 4 root 2. Okay? 3i comes from x minus 3i. Negative 3i comes from x plus 3i. Okay? Now, what I want you to do on these, I only want you to multiply out the I ones. You don't have to multiply out the square roots, just the i's, okay? Okay, so watch how this multiplies out. X times x is x squared. Now look, the outside and the inside are going to cancel out because plus 3ix and minus 3ix, like there's no point in really writing them because they're just going to go away anyways. Okay, so the outside, the inside cancel out. Now the last is negative 3 times positive 3, so it's negative 9, and I times I, which is I squared. But what you guys need to remember is, okay, if I is the square root of negative 1, I squared is that squared, which is negative 1. And so if I put that right here, it's now x squared, and then negative 9i squared is negative 9 times negative 1, which is positive 9. And so that's where the imaginaries come from. These, again, you're allowed to just leave those. Oops. Separate. Okay? All right. Last question. It's a bonus question. I'll probably give you a bonus question on the quiz also. All right, check it out. First of all, if you see an I, you've got to write its pair. Remember, imaginaries always come in pairs. The number in front stays the same, and just instead of putting plus I, you put minus I. So it's negative 5 minus I. Now let's write what these come from, okay? Okay, this, the 2 would go up. That comes from 2x plus 1, because it says minus, so it's opposite, right? Now do the opposite. This comes from x plus 5 minus I. This comes from x plus 5 plus I. Again, what I want you to do is I do want you to multiply out the i's together, just the I ones like we did over here, to get the full points on this problem. Now this is a little tricky. That's why it's a bonus question, because we're doing a 3 by 3. So I'm doing x plus 5 minus I, and then I'm doing x plus 5 plus I. And I'm going to go ahead and multiply this out, okay? All right, x times x is x squared. X times 5 is 5x. X times I is negative ix. Okay, 5 times x is 5x. 5 times 5 is 25. And 5 times I is negative 5i. My last row, I times x is ix. I times 5 is 5i. And I times negative I is negative I squared. Now, what's going to happen, and this is going to happen every time, and it's kind of cool. This is why I like doing it in the box. You'll see a pattern. Plus 5i and minus 5i cancel. Plus ix and minus ix cancel. Okay? Now, negative I squared. What is negative I squared? Well, remember from up here that I squared is negative 1. So what's negative I squared? Positive 1. Okay? So this actually goes away and turns into a positive 1. And so here's my answer. All right, this will stay. The 2x plus 1 will stay. This becomes x squared. Okay, now check this out. Right here, combine those. 5x plus 5x is 10x. And then right here and here, combine those. 25 plus 1 is 26. That's my answer. Okay? So you just multiply out the i's and you get this nice, pretty function right there. All right? And that's it. So guys, you print out the paper that I sent to you, or I could print it out for you if you ask me in school. You can print it at home, or you can just do this on paper. Go through this a couple times, watch the video, and then come in and let's retake this quiz. All right? Hope that helps.